Hello, everyone. I want to introduce our guest today, Adnan Aziz. Adnan is the founder and director of First Flavor Incorporated, really one of the pioneers in the flavor and sensory taste marketing industry. Adnan has been recognized for his work at First Flavor a number of times and was recently nominated as one of the top 25 entrepreneurs under the age of 25 by Business Week. Adnan's here today really to speak about his experiences at First Flavor and to share thoughts about innovation more broadly. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Adnan.
Thanks, guys. So I just want to say thanks for you guys for showing up, and thanks for Shoaib for the introduction, and Effie for setting this up. So I am the founder and director of First Flavor, and just here to talk today about a little bit about what First Flavor does. We are a marketing company, so that might have some relevancy, but I thought it might make sense to sort of not talk about the intricacies of flavor science, but kind of more broadly about how I thought of the idea and how sort of a college kid came up with this idea where, you know, there's all of these big companies like P&G in edible films and, you know, fragrance companies in fragrance marketing. So how all that came about and sort of where we've taken it from here. And then we'll open it up for questions. And obviously we've got some taste samples for you guys, so we'll pass those out at the end. So you've got to stay for the whole thing, unfortunately. So what we do is we're really in multisensory marketing, and multisensory marketing is kind of just getting off the ground. The kind of premise behind it is that you've got 5 senses, but yet only 2 of them are really used in marketing, and these 2 senses are being increasingly cluttered. So auditory and visual, pretty much. Yet there's 3 other senses to really touch consumers and get them engaged with brands. So what we do specifically is we market through the sense of taste. We can replicate the flavor of any product, or even sort of just a sort of broad set of flavors into edible films, kind of like a Listerine strip. And we can take one single strip and put it into a sachet, and that sachet, which is like this, can be tipped into magazines and direct mail and point of purchase. So in a variety of different ways, we can engage consumers. And for marketers, that's really big, because if you're flipping through a magazine for Sports Illustrated and you see an ad for a sports drink, well, you could try it right there. Or if you're walking through the aisle of a grocery store and you're wondering what the new lemon vanilla mint toothpaste tastes like, you could try it right there. So it's big in terms of getting brand awareness and recall. So we've found that marketers are using these in a variety of different ways. Besides just straight up flavor marketing and representing the taste of an actual product, we've been approached to do things for like concepts like for extreme sports, doing the taste of blood and grass and that dirt and that kind of stuff. So it really ranges. Actually, one of the strips we have here today is for an anti-smoking campaign, and it tastes like an ashtray. So I don't know if you want to try that. I personally have not tried that, but you're free to do so if you want. So how is it going? We've actually gotten a lot of buzz around the idea. One reason being is sort of where the idea came from, and we'll talk about that in a second. We're working with a lot of the top CPGs and doing trials in a variety of different touch points like we discussed. We're partnering with a lot of the best of breed distributors and publishers. So people are really excited about this. We're delivering sort of a lot of value to people in different industries, just because it's a new thing, and nobody's really touching the sense of taste in marketing right now. The trial results have been pretty great. I think for one of our first clients, which is Welch's, the recall was 70%, which was about as much as an 8-page insert. So instead of buying 8 pages in Vogue, you could do 1 with us and still pretty much get the same amount of recall. So this kind of speaks to how open the other senses are for marketing. And just sort of, if you think about it creatively, you can really sort of get more bang for your buck out of the other senses. So we're really proud of the fact that our first big client won Adweek Print Media Plan of the Year just recently. So that was pretty big. That was a nice pat on the back. So the thing that I really wanted to sort of talk about is just looking back in terms of how I thought of the idea. And it actually came from the movie Willy Wonka. It was kind of like a solution chasing a problem. And I've been sort of thinking about this and reflecting anyways, because there's always sort of this fear, I think, with entrepreneurs and innovators. There's like, did I just get lucky? Or like, how did this happen? Was I at the right place at the right time? Or can you actually really replicate this? So I thought that might make for an interesting subject to talk about. And definitely all of the following didn't happen, in 2 weeks or 10 slides. And And I didn't do it by myself. It involved like a lot of people, a lot of different conversations. But maybe this model can actually be replicated by you in a much easier way. So this quote sort of came to mind. The most exciting phrase to hear in science, the one that heralds new discoveries, is not eureka, but that's funny. It sort of points to the fact that a lot of the innovations and companies that you hear about were not sort of somebody thinking about a specific problem and just sitting at a table for 2 weeks and banging out the solution right away. It sort of doesn't happen like that. It kind of comes from the side. You kind of have some sort of moment where it's like out of the blue. That's interesting, and something sort of catches your ear. And I think that's very sort of the start of innovation. So this was sort of the beginning of my journey so far with First Flavor. I was a sophomore at Penn, and I saw this movie, and it sort of captured my imagination, like as it's captured a lot of people's imagination, and I sort of just kind of kept on thinking about the idea and harped on it while talking to friends. And so I kind of wanted to just take you through the journey of how it evolved from that single thing to where it is now in an actual company, and see if we can find a sort of replicable model for innovation. So when I really think about what was going on in my head, I saw, as you see the video, and I thought, this is kind of cool. It's taste reproduced as an image, and there's a sort of crossover between the senses. And this concept's actually called synesthesia. I didn't know that at the time, which is kind of interesting because your brain sort of works so fast that you process a lot of information, and when something catches your interest, it's probably for a more complex reason than just that's cool. And sort of delving deeper allows you to sort of dig into sort of abstract concepts. So you really need to get to get a aha. Like you don't sort of just stumble upon a great idea or a great discovery out of the blue. It takes some amount of just sort of awe or just sort of interest. And I think that there's so many of these moments every day. And just from my experience of talking to people, in the flavor industry, people who are really sort of close to the industry. I, being a college student, had not a lot of experience with flavors, flavor science, food science, but there have been so many people who love this movie, and they sort of had the same moment of that's interesting, but they sort of stopped there. And I think this is sort of a real tragedy because delving deeper really gets you down to the interesting part of the equation. And I think it's really the beginning of innovation. And just the more you read, the more sort of different things you read, the more you get a chance to have these connections in these moments of So let's talk about sort of after that, after I had sort of stopped and said, this is interesting, it kind of reminded me of something else from my childhood. And the first thing it reminded me of, I'm sure a lot of you remember this too, the scent markers, where they were like, the blue smelled like blueberry and the green smelled like, green apple. And I was like, okay, this is like, it's really cool. Like, I bet you could actually kind of do this. And I knew that vaguely that there was the existence of flavor essences just from sort of watching food TV and the Food Network. I just knew that existed. So it was pretty shallow in terms of my knowledge of the actual subject, but this connection just sort of happened in my mind. So then the next step, I think, is looking at what the connection is between what you just saw and made you sort of stop for a second, and what the associative memory was. So in this case, it was reproducing taste in a proxy way, like scent markers did. And the flavor essences sort of came into that picture because those were sort of, I thought, as the elementary building blocks. So now you sort of get a sort of connection, and you get a sort of an abstract concept that you can run with. The abstract concept, in my mind, produced a list of related topics to research. Even just from this, I was fortunate enough to get an entrepreneurial grant from Penn and just sort of do some research, meet with a lot of cool people, and talk about this. So the topics that came up for me were senses, flavoring, taste, food technology. So I pretty much met with as many people as I could and just read all around the subject. And reading all around the subject gave me sort of data points that were connected to this abstract concept. So things like edible inks. So an edible ink is, I guess it's synesthesia, I suppose, where it's one sense interlaced with another sense. Also fragrance marketing, because here they are using fragrance and they're using it for another purpose in a proxy way. Edible paper and film is another interesting one. I mean, that includes sort of Listerine strips, rice paper, experimental candy. I read about a lot of weird stuff, which is pretty interesting. For instance, I think there's this chef in Chicago whose restaurant I haven't gone to, but I hope one of you goes and checks it out. It's called Moto, and the chef is Hamaru Kantu, and he does a lot of really cool stuff, but one of the things that he does is he prints out menus on edible paper with flavorings. So if you're having sushi, you know, it tastes like seaweed, or if you're having Italian, it tastes like basil or something like that. So just a lot of really cool things. I just sort of try to grab as many data points as I possibly could. Subconsciously, now reflecting back, I see sort of what was happening. So from those data points, you sort of get a trendscape. So you see different things happening. For me, two of the biggest were there was a complete metaphor and a parallel in the example of fragrance marketing and what they were doing. So that was just a straight application. The other was learning about what was happening in the advancements in flavor science and flavor delivery in terms of edible films. So I saw these two things sort of, you know, crossing almost. And at that cross point, there was the opportunity. Sort of taking the data points, forming a trendscape in your mind, helps you identify the boundaries of the abstract idea. The idea that you originally thought that you had, it could be actually much larger, or it could actually be different than the original idea, which was what happened in my case. You can also sort of compare different opportunities in terms of the application, find the lowest hanging fruit. And a really cool thing that I picked up also sort of after the fact was you really have to look for metaphors. So you can sort of see a clear metaphor between fragrance marketing and what we do. And when you can sort of transfer one concept in one field to another field, it's actually called an isomorphism, which I picked up from this great book called Gödel, Escher, Bach, which is a really interesting concept because that's just a straightaway way to sort of recognize an opportunity. So what happened in my case? So originally, I was thinking of a cool children's toy, so a really direct interpretation of what I saw with the scent markers. So I was thinking, well, kids could play around with the sense of taste. So if sort of, you know, if you've got 5 senses and you get Mozart because the kid was allowed to, you know, at this formative age, play around with his auditory skills, and you get, you know, Dali because he was able to play around with visual skills, then what kind of minds are you going to get if they're allowed to play with the sense of taste? So I thought that was really interesting. And you know, if I had not read everything else, I might have just ran with that. And that could have been interesting, or it could have been a dead end. But upon further inputs, the application evolved. In my case, fragrance inserts are early successful, cutting through the clutter by using different senses, just sort of what was going on broadly with senses in general. And the sort of phenomenon of edible films at that time, I think Listerine strips were pretty hot, and everybody thought that was kind of a really cool thing. So those two things came together to produce sort of a great application of that abstract concept. And there's a parallel product for the sense of taste and marketing, and there lied the opportunity. So what happened afterwards, and keep in mind that this is sort of looking backwards and sort of more a description of the thought process and the evolution that way. Along the way, I got to connect with a group of great people, a lot of different entrepreneurs, one of them being Josh Koppelman from First Round Capital. He became my first angel a few months after college. I spent the kind of required few months crashing on friends' couches and pitching and stuff like that. So that was my sort of war story at that time. So one of the angels came along and became the CEO. And they kind of provided really the business savvy that I lacked being straight out of college. The execution, although I was a bioengineer, I was bioengineering and political science at Penn. And although I could sort of understand sort of broad engineering concepts, I wasn't really in the lab, working away at edible films and things like that. We really use just the power of the internet to source the technology. So there's a little shout out to Google there. Because, I don't think that previously, if you just look back to patents in general, the process for finding out what is patentable back then was you had to send in a form to the patent office with everything you could possibly think of around your subject. They would go through this huge warehouse of stuff, with card catalogs, and I have no idea how big this place was. And maybe a few months later, they'd come back to you with a list of stuff, which is probably old by then anyways, right? And this process would go back and forth forever. Nowadays, all I had to do was go on to the USPTO site, look it up, search very easily, and then even sort of learn more about what was going on, which I don't think was even possible. I mean, I couldn't comprehend doing this then. So this new tool was just huge for us. We just used Google pretty much to find, who's in the edible films, who are the flavor folks, and sort of how it all worked together. So that was gigantic. Product development took about 2 years. This was a lot of learning. It was definitely not trivial. We pretty much had to put it together the entire cycle, from formulations to packaging, and get these guys to talk to these guys. So that was a pretty big hurdle, and it took us 26 iterations to yum. When we first started out, I mean, the first iteration was like dry, and it would crack and stuff, and you can see sort of how far we've come. And when you gave it to somebody, we had people spitting it out like immediately. We had to like apologize to people after giving it to them. It was that gross. But we've actually come a long way, and I'm pretty proud of that. So we've gotten actually traction in the market. We've done a lot of trials in different sort of applications, and now for us, the real goal now is to go from novelty and sort of one-offs to the standard for taste marketing, and really getting this into the marketing mix, moving it from sort of experimental marketing budgets to promotions marketing budgets. So that's essentially where we're at. Just sort of wrapping up here. I know I sort of said a lot, and I probably said it fast. So whenever something sort of interests you, I think you should really sort of think about how you think, and think about why that's interesting to you. Because sort of as we're all sort of taught that we're all so unique, in actuality, if you think something's interesting, chances are there's probably maybe 100 million people who probably agree with you. Probably, like, I mean, you could just see like the searches, right, that people are searching, that you guys project on the thing, and how many of those things can you sort of relate to, right? So there's a lot there. So it's really important not to sort of take yourself out of the equation that way. I mean, when you find something interesting, that's really sort of powerful. So I would sort of respect your place in the whole mix. And then sort of go further, and after you've thought about how you think and why you thought that thing was interesting, then really sort of delve deep into the broad topics and find different data points and find out how they're related, because that's very interesting, and it's very important in finding this sort of trendscape. So I mean, like, I guess if you think about it, trends are sort of where society is moving, and if you can find sort of where we're at now and where you think we'll be, you don't make money on where we're at now, you make money on where we're going to be 5 years ago. And the only way you can sort of project that is if you find data points and sort of extend this line out. I think that, going back to sort of the first slide of where we're talking about innovation, people, I think, really see this concept, this sort of, I guess, the innovator's dilemma as sort of finding a solution that's chasing problems, which might not be that bad. I mean, usually, I guess the way that big business is done is you have a hypothesis, and then you just go out and you try to find data that then justifies what you originally thought, come hell or high water, until the thing tanks. But if you sort of look at it from what's interesting to you and go from there, I think it might provide a lot of value. So that's just sort of my my experience. So that's about it. There is my information, and I'm definitely open to questions. We've got some taste samples here for you guys to taste. Anybody? Oh, and there's, I think, a mic or something.
You do have a mic? Anybody? Then I'll ask. What industries have you found taking up on this taste marketing most, beyond just Welch's and the food industry itself?
Yeah, actually, well, I don't need a mic. There's a few industries that really have a lot of pain points around sampling. One of them being the liquor industry, because obviously you can't give shots to people all over the place. So our samples have no calories. They have no alcohol, even the alcoholic ones. Another one would be sort of flavored medicines, sort of anything where flavor's creeping in, but there's a there's a pain point in sampling something is a real low-hanging fruit for us. So we've found a lot of traction in those kind of things. That actually, I think like 2 out of the 4 samples we have here are for liquor products.
This isn't a very deep question, but
Sure.
I'm just curious how much the little strips cost.
Oh, packaged, they cost about 10 cents, which is high, but we're delivering a lot of value, and the results of our trial kind of show that it's a very sort of powerful way.
Well, on the same topic, you mentioned that you have the same recall as 8 pages of magazine print. What's the per magazine cost for 8 pages in dollars? I mean, do you know?
I couldn't really tell you off the top of my
I
head.
presume it's higher than 10 cents.
I bet it is. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you. How did you go about getting your first successful sale, and how did you figure out how to price that sale?
Right. At the very beginning, obviously, with an experimental marketing product, it's very hard to get traction. And that definitely took a lot of just hitting the streets and calling up brand managers. So right after product development, it's sort of, pretty much cold calls. And we've got a sort of a pretty interesting value proposition. So people were always sort of willing to sit down and talk about it. Not everybody, but sort of people were. So in terms of the price points, I mean, you're just trying to get adoption. So you pretty much price as low as you possibly can. You give out trial prices pretty much, and you go from there. So those trial prices really don't reflect either value, because that's kind of unknown. So they're really around cost more. Yeah, it's pretty much at cost or cost plus a little bit. No problem.
And in the presentation, you alluded to the fact that you didn't do this all yourself.
Right.
So I was wondering if you could tell us more about the team members that you had, that you worked with, how you got traction,
Sure.
how you stayed motivated. And
So actually in college, when I was applying for the entrepreneurial grants, there was a good friend of mine that was working on this with me. He had to go and do sort of the normal track, but it was a great help. At that point, we were actually thinking about edible greeting cards. So that was our application, and we were going to go ahead with that. And we get all the way to sitting down with like the COO of American Greetings and his whole cadre. But like I said, this wasn't over 2 weeks, and I didn't figure all this stuff out in terms of how to sort of more broadly think about the topic. So we definitely hit some dead ends. And then after I got out of college, it was just me. The angel Josh Koppelman introduced me to a gentleman by the name of Jay Minkoff, who then became the CEO. For about 1 year, it was just Jay and myself, and we outsourcing pretty much everything we can. Then we really slowly grew. Sort of brought on about 2 people per, I'd say about every 6 months, and now we're up to about 10 people. So we really, as a small company, we really use sort of partnerships to act bigger and play bigger. So in terms of the flavor science, we actually have a flavor company that's our partner in this, and they make all the formulations, and we know how to take the formulations and put them into the edible film matrix. So that's really sort of how things happen.
Are there any interesting challenges you guys face in flavor science and flavor marketing with regards to like having to get FDA approval or anything like that, or any health concerns with people maybe having allergic reactions to something they taste in a magazine?
Yeah, we use all GRAS material, so everything that we use is generally recognized as safe. So these are things that are known to all food manufacturers, and the lawyers definitely make sure that none of these things are allergic, even down to the specific dyes that are used and everything. So each formulation has to go through sort of our own internal review, as well as everybody's involved from the food company itself, the publisher, and down the line. So that's definitely something that we look at. So far, I mean, there's not been a product that we couldn't do because of something like that. It's just that you have to pay a lot of attention to it. And every product has to be sort of scrutinized in that way. That's a good question.
Hi, I was just wondering, since you did come from a bioengineering poli-sci background, how you were able to kind of get your team up to speed as far as like having like a marketing company right now.
Yeah, I mean, I was really fortunate in the people that came on with me were really, really successful and sort of well-versed in those kind of things. You know, sort of they ran huge marketing companies before, so I really sort of got to learn from them. So, you know, it was a sort of it was interesting, sort of being the founder, but I wasn't the CEO from the get-go, and that was something that sort of I understood. You know, that you don't have to be the CEO. You can sit down, you can learn from the people around you, and especially when you're dealing with older people, like that's a real benefit. You know, rather than sort of a power struggle. So
sorry, just to follow up. So would you say that as far as like, if your background doesn't necessarily fit your idea, that shouldn't be like a hindrance to innovation?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I did not have a food background or a flavor science background, yet I was sort of able to step into this. And yeah, I mean, I think great ideas can come from anywhere.
So you mentioned the ashtray tasting thing and the grass tasting thing. No, I'm actually just interested in how you guys are looking for the future to sort of bridge the gap from food and drug products. No, from like food and drug products, which are obviously a lot of, to something that is not a product that's edible, but you can still play to the sense of taste to market that.
Yep. It's more of a capability that we have, and that we can sort of, you know, make people aware of. But it's not something that we're readily sort of promoting. It's more that agencies hear about us, and then agencies come with, you know, their sort of wild thoughts. We've had a lot of agencies that have randomly, you know, Googled just bizarre things like, I wonder if I can do this, and they're pretty sure they can't, but they're like, you know. They sit down and they type it out, and then they find us, and they're like, "Oh, wow, maybe we can." So we get a lot of excited agencies, and they're like, "I got the craziest idea for you guys." So, yeah.
So when they find you, is it through AdWords or just natural results?
Yeah, I think it's natural results, but we do use AdWords. Yeah, and yeah, we do all that SEO stuff. So that's definitely an important part of it. Obviously, we try to have as many press releases as we possibly can, but yeah.
Yeah, so in working with partners to get a lot of the manufacturing in this get up, how do you kind of, or what were some of the ways you protect kind of your competitive advantage, or people just replicating after you've put all this into proving a really good idea?
Yeah, well, first of all, patent protection. It's interesting, it's a utility patent, and there's tons of big players in this field, but they're all in the realm of sort of using the product to deliver something. So Listerine is for breath freshening. Then there's tons of sort of OTC products, you know, for cough repellent, suppressing, and other things like vitamins and things like that. And we were sort of using it as a proxy for something else. So in terms of the patent, that's what we've gotten, and it's pretty solid. Although the patents office is on a gigantic lag, so we still haven't received the actual notification yet. And in terms of the other protection, just the barriers to entry that we went through to get this packaged, were pretty huge. It took us 2 years for a reason, and that was because it wasn't done. So the players that we've lined up and the partnerships that we've lined up are pretty unique in that way. The last thing is sort of there's a bit of a black box around how to mesh one flavor with the films, because each time you introduce a new flavor, it changes the characteristics of the film, and the know-how to mesh those together is quite a big thing. Because, you know, although Procter & Gamble is in it with Listerine, I'm sorry, it's not Procter & Gamble, but Listerine, they just produce one film over and over and over again, but having the variety of different flavors requires a different sort of skill set. So,
thank you.
Thanks. Yes.
I was just curious. this is obviously an entrepreneurial venture, and what role models did you have, or what? I mean,
yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, actually, I got to meet this guy named John Osher, who I had never heard of before, but he came to the Weiss Tech House where I got funding, and he spoke, and he's got a great resume, and it's really interesting because he started out as almost as sort of a hippie in Boston, and he went through sort of 7 years after college of being a plumber and being a handyman and a taxi cab driver and all this different stuff, and then he went on to start Cap toys. I think we're too young to sort of remember it, but there was this toy called Stretch Armstrong, and he invented that along with some other stuff. But the most recent thing that he did was he invented the Crest spin brush, which he sold to Procter & Gamble for $475 million, which I think is still a record. But he was just a very interesting guy because, I mean, he wasn't sort of, he didn't have a sort of a deep skill set in this thing. He literally, he pretty much was the model of taking a solution and finding a problem. So they saw the technology behind spinnable lollipops, and they literally walked around a grocery store or a Walmart or something, and were like, what can we use this for? This is like a really interesting and useful technology, and where can we find the best fit? And they stopped at, Sonic Care toothbrushes are, I don't know how much, and there's just a good fit here. So he was a really interesting guy to talk to. And beyond that, I just love to read biographies of business people and things like that. And my dad's an engineer, and he's sort of a inventor, kind of around the house more, but it was interesting growing up there.
Well, I've got another one. You mentioned that agencies have come to you guys with some really crazy ideas. Mm-hmm. Can you talk to some of the more interesting ones?
I think while I was there, the craziest one was the dirt and the blood and the grass, because we were actually sitting down and talking about, how are we going to do this? And it turns out that the flavor scientist actually has to, whenever they're doing sort of analysis, they're sitting down with the actual product and sort of comparing it and mixing and matching and stuff. So the poor guy, I think, would actually have to eat some grass or try some blood or something else like that. So, yeah. And there are a lot of other sort of things that dirty old man suggestions that I won't get into.
So with the ashtray, did somebody actually have to?
I think so. We've opened it, I think, for the first time, and we smelled it. It smelled pretty much like an ashtray. I can actually smell it from here. So I think it's pretty close. Okay. Well, I've got a small plug as well. So I've actually left day-to-day at First Flavor, and sort of just to relax and take some time off, spend time with my family. So after we've got traction, I've sort of had another idea that I'm pursuing. It's in social network monetization, influencer marketing, and if anybody knows Bill Maris or David Drummond, let me know. So that's what you guys are starting a VC fund. Yeah. And there's my email address. Feel free to contact me. I'm, always interested to talk to anybody and hear about what's going on. So, and now we've got a bunch of taste strips that yeah. So we've got I think a Hornitos margarita, Welch's grape juice, and Sky passion fruit vodka. So there are different ones that are floating around. So feel free to grab one. There you go. I'll let you pass these out. And if you want the ashtray, it's over here.
Okay. So thank you so much to Adnan for coming out and speaking with us today. We do have a couple minutes left, so as you guys are passing these around, if anyone wants to come up and talk to Adnan about anything else here, or if you happen to be working on, say, Open Social or something, and you want to see what else you guys can come up with together, please feel free. So thank you so much.